Namaste, friend. We are starting a special show on Saturday. As you know, we completed Legal Words of Wisdom, Nyay Gyan Ganga, with its 21 episodes with Dr. Venkat Iyer. And today we are embarking on a different uh, set of knowledge. It is uh, going to be Economic Gyan Ganga, Arthik Gyan Ganga, or Economic Words of Wisdom, Arthik Gyan Ganga, which we are launching on every Saturday at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time on our Virat Hindustan Sangam social media channels. And as you know, we had launched originally during the pandemic the program of Words of Wisdom Gyan Ganga as a daily show on from the 2nd of April 2020. Thereafter, 2 3 months, we went as a daily show, and then we converted into a Sunday show, which is our regular Sunday show on Sundays at 8 p.m. Then, as you know, we started the Legal Words of Wisdom, and after this 21st show, now we have converted this into Economic Words of Wisdom, that is Arthik Gyan Ganga. And for that, we have Dr. Subramanian Swamy and Professor Arvind Chaturvedi. Both of them have a PhD in economics, and both of them will be conducting this show. And it will be another interesting 15 series or 15 Saturday show where basics of economics will be introduced by Dr. Swamy. Today's topic is going to be Introduction to Economics. Is it common sense? And we will be hearing from Dr. Swamy, and thereafter the program will be moderated by Arvind Chaturvedi. Our motto of Virat Hindustan Sangam has been educate and empower. So through these programs, through our movement of Virat Hindustan Sangam, we endure and ensure that our viewers across the globe get tuned into the latest, and we want to spread knowledge. So with this is over to Dr. Subramanian Swamy. But before that, I wish to also thank my co-host Ramesh Swamy and our technical team led by Ashish Shetty, Vishal Mehta, Ishwar Iyer, Rakesh Gadgi, Tejas, and Swaminathan for their support in putting all these types of program together. They work in the background and see that we are able to present our Saturday and Sunday show. So our Saturday 8 p.m. and Sunday 8 p.m. show will continue as usual. So it's over to Dr. Swamy. Professor Swamy, please take us through this new interesting series.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jagdish. It's a great opportunity because economics is such an important subject. And you can't have novices speaking about economics because then they make hilarious mistakes and it becomes bad for the image of the country if the leaders of the country don't know basic economics and then they speak on economics. First of all, I would like to remove the impression that economics is just common sense. It is not common sense. It is in fact the most uncommon sense you can have. I'll give you an example also. It's a science, and it is the only subject amongst all the social sciences and arts and so on, where in 1969 Nobel committee made a departure and added one more subject to the list of people to be given the Nobel Prize. And so the only social science which is eligible for a Nobel Prize is economics. And the first thing went to first it went to those who proposed it, and then the real award came for the genius of the 20th century and the Einstein of economics, namely Paul Samuelson. And the other was Simon Kuznets the next year. And he got the Nobel Prize for his contribution to the economics of growth, the development of the concept of GDP, and the quantitative analysis of economic growth. So these two were, in fact, I was intimately connected with them. Both were my teachers when I was a graduate student. Simon Kuznets became my thesis advisor. Paul Samuelson became a co-author in the field of index numbers. And for a long time, we were very good, and they were very, very proud of me. They used to introduce me to in on all the forums, and deeply disappointed when I went back to India. And in India, I suffered all kinds of persecution. The IIT, the Delhi School of Economics, which wrote me a letter to come and occupy the chair on Chinese economics. Upon my arrival, the Congress party had split, and the communists came into government as a coalition partner. And the first thing they did was block me. And I said, but to Mr. Amartya Sen, who was the chairman of the department, that you wrote me this letter in your own hand, with the vice chancellor's letter annexed, and now you're saying that I can't give it. He says, well, the ideological conditions have changed in the country and you don't fit in. That is, I was against socialism. And why I was against socialism, I'll explain a little later. And then, of course, I went to IIT, and for 3 years, I regaled the students, because the engineering students all knew mathematics. So I taught them all economics through mathematics. They were all thrilled. And that had a bad impact on Mrs. Gandhi, who got very agitated. She even took up a book I wrote on the alternative to Indian planning. And she said that this is a very dangerous thesis. A man like Santa Claus says, we can produce this, we can produce that, we can produce this. How is he in the IIT? And then lo and behold, I was dismissed. And after 22 years of fighting it in court, I won the case. I was told to go back, as if no such order of dismissal was passed against me. And I joined IIT for one day. And the next day I told the director, I finished beneath my dignity to be a professor at IIT for the way you treated me. So I said, I'm resigning, and left. They wouldn't give me my back salary. I went for that also to court, and ultimately I got 22 years of back salary at 8% interest, which I would never have got had I stayed in IIT and retired. So I was all, and of course, Moraji Desai appointed, and Shanta Kumar as Himachal Chief Minister appointed me as a member of the Board of Governors, the very body which dismissed me. And when Moraji told me this, I said, how can I go and attend that board meeting? They are all people who dismissed me. He said, don't worry, I've already dismissed all of them. I'm setting up a new board. So I got my revenge in many ways, but it's a great pity I couldn't continue teaching. Harvard wanted me back, particularly Paul Samuelson and Kuznets, but I decided to stay in India. And I think India's economic growth is wholly enterprise, in the sense that we were the most developed country in the world, and we need to become most developed country in the world again, and we have the potential for it. This is what I'm going to lay first I'll lay the conceptual basis, and then I will go on to explain to you how India can become a huge, a very fast developing, at least 10% per year in GDP growth rate, and perhaps even 12% and 13%. So we can overtake China in 10 years. We can take Americans, we can challenge the Americans in another 10 years. And probably if we do extremely good work on the innovations, new machines, new technology, artificial intelligence, etc., we will overtake America, because you can see in America also today they are relying very heavily on Indian brains in these areas. So we have a great opportunity to see, in at least the young people who are listening to this, that in your lifetime you could see India as the greatest economic power and the world outstanding country of the world, like we were once upon a time. So having said all this, let me say, first of all, economics is not common sense. And I'll give you examples why it's not common sense. And first of all, I want to tell you the word GDP is used. People use GDP. I asked many people who are not economists, what is GDP? And they all said, well, all the production added up. It's not so, because if supposing I produce steel and then I also produce rice, I can't add steel to rice, because part of the steel will go as intermediate product to build something else like bicycles, tractors, and so many. So therefore you have to subtract all that. So the net output minus the inputs, and that is not so easy, you see. That therefore we have something called input output analysis, which Professor Leontief, another teacher of mine, and with whom I also address classes, he also got the Nobel Prize. He got the third person to get the Nobel Prize, and he was also a Harvard professor, and he invented this input output analysis, which is a superb technique, which I will explain to you in a subsequent class. So what is GDP? It is the addition of net output in each sector. If I produce rice and then the rice is made into masala dosa, I can't include masala dosa and rice. So the amount of rice that has gone into masala dosa, I have to subtract. And so the net rice production, which I may eat as rice, and then you can add on to other things. So this how this is done by input output analysis, I'll tell you. But be clear that GDP is not the sum total of all production in the country. And by the way, production is not the only thing. Even services are quantified. So how do you add up? You add up by multiplying their prices. And then the problem becomes that, okay, in this 1 year you got GDP in say trillions of rupees, but next year the prices may have gone up, and if you use that to compare, that's unfair, because the inflation component will give you an exaggerated impression of the growth rate. It will just be inflating the output. The output may be the same or even less, but if the prices have gone up, then of course the value will go up, and therefore you will get the wrong answer. So this is a very complicated subject, but let me just now say GDP is the sum of the net output in the country and services which are valued at the price at which, or the wages at which they are provided, if it is in the case of service, and that value term is called GDP. If you stick to 1 year, like 2021 prices, and then all future, you only evaluate not in the yearly prices but in 2020 prices, 21 prices, then that is called constant prices, and all comparisons are made on constant prices. And otherwise, if you multiply it by every year's price, then that is called current prices. And unfortunately, Jet Li did not know this, and so he made a lot of guffaws on that. But anyway, he's gone, so I won't pursue that matter. But a lot of wrong things were said in Parliament, which I had to correct and stand up and become very unpopular. So this is one. Now, the Prime Minister said on 26th May 2019, after getting a second term, that I will see that the GDP becomes $5 trillion in 5 years from now. Now, he said it. Now, I was shocked when he said it. At that time, the corona and all that had not come, but even then, I will just now tell you why I thought that was a ridiculous statement. But if you are going to have 5 trillion, then how much did you have in 29 on May 26th 2019-2020, that financial year? Now, you see why we use this inconvenient financial year. We should use January 1 to January 1, but we don't. We're still following this crazy British system that from 1st April to 31st March the next year is called the financial year. In calendar wise, 1st January to 1st January or 31st December. But in economics, in financial data and all, we use this financial year, cause a lot of confusion. But it starts on 1st April and goes till 31st March, which means for the next year, January, February, March. So in that basis, the growth rate is calculated. Now, when he says it is double, I told you the growth rate will be, you'll have to grow at 14.4%. How do you know? People ask me, how can you suddenly say this? And I got up in Parliament and said it is impractical because it's 40. So how do you know? This is calculations done by Niti Aayog and this and that and computers. I give you a simple formula, which I've got from numerical analysis. It's one of the topics in mathematics. Take 72 as a fixed number and put the number of years for doubling below as denominator. That number, 72 divided by, say, 5, that becomes what? 5 means 1, and then that means 14.4%. 14.4. So 72 by the number of years for doubling multiplied by 100 to make it percentage terms means that the growth rate, the number of years that the growth rate that you require in 5 years to double will be 14.4%. Modi also said another thing, that agricultural output I will double. That is in 4 years. So in 4 years, if you're going to double, then 72 divided by 4 is how much? 18%. Can agricultural growth rate at this particular time that we are in, with the kind of economics we are practicing, can you expect the agricultural growth rate to be 18% per year? We are not even getting 4% per year. So, I mean, saying that the whole world was laughing, but we were going on $5 trillion, $5 trillion, doubling of agricultural product. And that's why you need to know economics. I unfortunately couldn't help myself, so I said publicly that Modi doesn't know any economics, so why blame him? His people around him should have told him. But everybody got angry. You're criticizing Modi. He's some god I can't criticize. He's made a mistake. I make a mistake in zoology, biology. I don't know any biology. If somebody says Swami doesn't know any biology at all, I won't feel insulted. Why should anybody feel insulted if I say you don't know economics, especially when if you don't know? So anyway, I'm saying that don't please get into this a technical subject. Be very careful. So the first thing I would say is, if you ever want to know what growth rate you need for doubling, take the fixed number 72 and put the number of years in the denominator, divide, and you will get the growth rate. If in 10 years you want to double, 72 divided by 10 is 7.2, and so 7.2% per year growth rate you need. So this is the first thing I want to tell you, that please be very careful on these. The second thing is why it is not common sense, which I'm going to give a very big example a little later in international trade, for which you'll get a graph. By the way, I just want to thank Mr. Ramesh. He has produced a graph of what happened after BJP came to power. And the growth rate in I'm taking it not right from the beginning, it becomes too long to fit into the graph. 2018 Q1, every year we have been going down. And the last quarter is the quarter January 1 to 31st March, when the corona was about to begin at the end of March. We did a lockdown on 25th of March. So there was only 3.10, which is lower than Jawaharlal Nehru's growth rate of 3.5, which they used to mockingly say was the Hindu rate of growth. Now this is a super Hindu rate of growth. How can you hide this fact? You say that, Vikas, what about this graph? Can you contradict this? I'll take it out of the economic survey put out by the finance ministry and tucked in this graph. CSO has published this graph, Central Statistical Organization. So you have to analyze, and it's not that it has suddenly come upon us. I was writing articles in op-ed in the Hindu, which was the only paper which was willing to publish, saying that the economy is heading for a tailspin. And at that time, the coronavirus affected us. And the first quarter, that is April 1 to 30th June 2020, for the year 2020-21, was minus 23.9%. So almost 24%. Minus it had gone. And subsequently it's also minus. Every year, every day we'll get the finance minister to give a spin. No, V-shaped turn. Everything is turned around. Where is it turned around? And when they produce the figures, I say, you have not included in these figures MSMEs, informal sector, services. All these are only the data is collected by sample survey. The CSO cannot conduct sample surveys in during the time of coronavirus pandemic. So where did you get this number from? Did you guess it? So it's a bogus number if it is there. In fact, the number is there not at all. So the numbers that are being put out, you have to look at a little deeper, and you find that you have been bluffed. There is no V-shaped. It's all still going down. So we don't know when it will turn around, because unless if you had a declining growth rate for 3-4 years earlier or several quarters, then how do I know it won't decline further? So therefore, how to turn it around? I will discuss that later. There is a way to turn it around, but right now I'm only. So now another common sense thing is that if wages become less, if labor charges less, then there will be more unemployment. Now, what happened in 1926? There was a developing depression in America and several European countries. So the American president called all the economists of that time and said, listen, I'm going to an election and there is so much unemployment. So can you tell me a way by which this unemployment can be reduced, at least till the election time? After elections, we'll see. So they said, you see, the economists, the wages are too high due to collective bargaining. So you talk to the unions and say, listen, I have an election coming, so please agree to a 10% cut in the wages as an extreme measure, so that the employment will rise, because labor has become cheap. So once the wages fall down, people will recruit more and the thing will go up. Employment will go up. So the labor union said, okay, on the promise that after elections you will allow us to not only raise it back to where it was, the wage rate, but even a little more. He said, yes, sure, after that I will do it. Now, once the wages were cut, then what happened? The unemployment increased. So everybody is baffled. What is this? So he called all the economists, and he called one economist from London called John Maynard Keynes. And he said, what is this? What is all this economic sciences? It all looks like bogus. They said, then John Maynard Keynes said that you have been working in the microeconomic field. That is one product, one price, that's all. This is macroeconomics. So he said, what do you mean? When you cut the wages, what happened? The purchasing power of the worker also went down. And when the purchasing power of the worker went down, then the demand for goods also went down. So shops started closing down, especially the MSMEs and these informal sectors and so on, service sector, they started collapsing. And therefore, due to their closing down, unemployment is increased. So there is no such thing that if prices rise, demand will fall. For demand rises, prices. These are all people who have got just hopeless education in economics. Economics is a multi-dimensional a system. They're all intersectoral. Same thing happened with this Raghuram Rajan. Yes.
Let me just say about demand and supply, one very interesting thing.
Ah.
Cigarette prices are increased every year in the budget. Excise is increased, taxes are increased. But cigarette demand doesn't go down.
Ah.
So the demand price is not applicable for all the commodities and all the services and all the products.
No, cigarette. The cigarette prices don't. Consumption doesn't go down because people give other things. Give up other things to pay the extra price. That's called substitution in economics. I'll come to that later. It's a good
Dr.
point,
Swamy,
but
there has been a question from the viewers about this 72, and
yes.
some people have also asked that how can you challenge the statistics given by the Central Statistical Office about the doubling of the income. Now, it is very simple. It's a simple mathematics. 2 is equal to 1 plus r by 100 raised to the power 5. Find out the value of r. Now, log 2, when you take the log on both the sides, log 2 is equal to 0.3 and the denominator is 0.06. So it is 5.11 years actually.
Listen, now we are talking like a professor. I'm talking to young people who are learning, want to learn. I have done a numerical analysis and taken approximation.
Yes.
So if a plus b, is taken to the power 2, the bracket close in 2, then you get a square plus b square plus 2ab.
Right.
So I will say if a and b are small, then ab is even smaller. So ignore it. So a plus b whole square is approximately a square plus b square.
Right.
By that kind of calculation, I got 72 by the number of years for doubling, and then that is equal to the growth rate, and or 72 divided by the growth rate will tell you the number of years you need for doubling. Right. Supposing you have 72 divided by a growth rate of 18.8%, obviously you'll get 5. So therefore, not 18, 14, you'll get 5. So therefore, I'm saying, right now, this is called axiomatic. You don't ask me questions to go behind my calculations just yet. You're too ahead of your time.
Okay. Swamy,
yeah.
You were mentioning about the pandemic GDP. I'm just going to quickly display that information that you're looking for.
Yeah, sure. See, boom. And they're saying it's gone up. Okay, gone up, but still minus. I mean, 23.
As of September, Dr. Swamy, as of September. Huh? Yeah, the data is up to September of last year. That's what I
know. But I still don't know. What that rising up part excludes. If it excludes MSME and informal sector, it is a bogus V. See, it's not a genuine V. But the other parts are all true. So let me get back to the question. The other part was when you had Raghuram Rajan. He said, and all these society ladies like film actresses and all, they thought he was very handsome, so therefore his economics must be also good. He was not an economist. He was an IIT BTech from Delhi. Then he went in Ahmedabad, got an MBA. Then he got a PhD in finance. Finance is a one-dimensional subject. Okay, economics is a multi-dimensional subject. So he said, to control inflation, I must control money supply. And to control money supply, I must raise the interest rate so that people don't want to borrow as much. All right. But when you raise the interest rate, the MSMEs and the informal sector who entirely live on loans from banks, they couldn't afford the extra cost of repayment. So they closed down. More MSME, that is medium, small industries, enterprises, closed down during Raghuram Rajan period. It took me a long time arguing with the PM that this guy is going to ruin you. Maybe he's come for that. So sack him. So his term ended, so he sent him home. And everybody pounced on me, Shobana, they, and all those characters, saying, I was jealous of his good looks. I mean, how can I be jealous of good looks when good looks matter nothing to me in politics, you see. Anyway, So therefore, I mean, they were very crude, those ladies, but anyway, leave it at be. So now I'm saying that in an economy, if you raise interest rates, please know that maybe you will cut money supply, but you will also make the cost of capital rise, which will make people collapse if they are working at the margin, which most MSMEs work. So therefore, this holistic thing about economics, that is what you need to understand. So this is one aspect, that economics is not common sense. Economics is a technical subject and you have to learn the technical aspects. Now you come to another part. Mr. Ramesh has produced this table. Now, if I'm going to tell you what is called as counter common sense. Assume I'm simplifying the problem. There are two nations, India and US. Assume that both product per labor, rice and cloth is produced. Okay, both the products per labor hour of rice and cloth. That is there. The table describes the structure. India, rice for one labor hour is 10. And for producing one piece of cloth, 5 labor hours. And USA 20. It's a more productive country. Okay, but in USA the ratio of rice to cloth is 1:1, and in the case of India it is 2:1. I am now simplifying it, so I am not going into the nitty-gritty of which is more productive labor, which is not more productive labor, all that question. Per labor hour, equally expensive in both countries. Now, the common sense would see that US and India have no reason to trade because India is behind the United States in both the commodities. One is 10 and the other, and US is 20, and then India is 5 and they are 20. Why should they trade? Wrong. Now let's give you an example. Suppose both countries decide to specialize. India will produce only rice and USA will produce only cloth. So next page please. Yeah. So now per labor hour what you will get? You will get instead of you will get 10 for one labor hour and 0 because you are specializing. And then USA, because they are specializing in not producing rice, so it's 0, and they are specializing in cloth and they're getting 20, which was before. So assume 100 hours are spent in producing. India will produce 1,000 kg of rice, 10 times multiplied by 100, and US will produce 2,000 pieces of cloth. Okay. Now the US says, I offer to sell 50 pieces of cloth. To the US, it is what in technical language is called the opportunity cost. This is a concept you must remember because it will be used throughout in economics. And I'll explain more later, but today I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go fast on this. For the United States, 50 pieces of cloth is worth 50 kgs of rice because they produce 20. That means for 1 kg, one piece of cloth. So that is the ratio of rice to cloth is 1:1. Then for India, 50 kgs of rice will bring an extra 25 pieces because 2:1 is the ratio, because 5, 10, so 50 kg, then 100, so the extra will be 25, and therefore it will be profitable to specialize and trade rice for cloth. So this is called a comparative advantage country, even though absolutely United States is far ahead of India, but comparatively, relatively, India has an advantage in selling rice, and United States has advantage in cloth. So there is a exchange. Now I'm not including transportation costs. This thing, that'll all be huge mathematical operation that will come to later if we find time. But at the moment, this simple example shows you what on the face of it is not actually true. Now I will conclude with two or three remarks. How do you calculate growth rate of GDP? Now, the traditional method is GDP in 2021 minus GDP in 2020 divided by GDP 2020 multiplied by 100. That is the growth rate. So that's a crude way of doing it. But the economics way of doing it, which is of importance to us, is the denominator is the rate of savings, which means the total investment divided by the total GDP divided by the efficiency in the use of capital, which we call as the capital output ratio, which usually in an efficient country is 3, inefficient country like India is 5 to 6, and that means if you put in India 5 rupees into an investment, then every year till infinity you will get 1 rupee every year. If it's 3 like Japan or United States in the earlier years, then you put in 3 rupees investment and every year you will get 1 rupee, 1 rupee, 1 rupee, 1 rupee. So it's called the measure of the efficiency in the use of capital, capital output ratio. And we have an incremental capital output ratio is because the capital output ratio can go up and down, so on. So I won't get into that just now. So the rate of investment is the total investment divided by the GDP. Divide that by the divide that by the capital efficiency coefficient or capital output ratio coefficient. You will get the growth rate, and multiplied by 100, you will get percentage growth rate. For instance, if the growth rate of India is 35, the rate of investment in India is 35, that is the total investment is 35% of the GDP, and divide that by the capital output ratio or the efficiency measure, which is 5, then 36 divided by 5 is how much? 525, 6%, 7.2. Okay, so if it is 6, then it is only 6. So as this inefficiency increases, the growth rate also increases. But supposing Indian growth efficiency was so improved that it fell to 3, this is the rate of the productivity, which is called the incremental capital output ratio. If you are by efficiency, by making people, all this tax returns, everything is making people inefficient. Make people, tell them, listen, you produce, I will give you free hand for earning. Then this rate of, in my opinion, this rate capital efficiency or productivity of capital, also called incremental output capital ratio, will come down from 5 or 6 down to 3. And during the early stages of Japanese growth, it was only 2. They were so efficient. So if it is 3 and you have 36 as your rate of investment, which is what it was before all this demonetization and GST and everything came and ruined our saving system. The 36 divided by 3 means what? 12%, right?
Right.
So you can, with the 36%, which you is a rate of investment which is within your reach, you have reached it many times, and reduce the capital inefficiency so that it becomes from 5 to 3, you can grow at 12% per year. So the key thing in accelerating growth is the the efficiency of capital. And the efficiency of capital will only come when you stop harassing people to evade incomes, to hide their thing, splurge on the investment so that they can get a tax deduction, all that. All this tax system, everything, all this socialism has ruined us. So therefore, this is the most important thing. The difference between micro and macro is the entire economy. What happens in one place will affect another place. And I'll demonstrate this when I do input-output analysis in a very explicit way. And the other micro is one-to-one. That is, if there's nothing else, my price rises, my demand will fall. So I can't afford. But if it is a macro system, then I'll shift to something else. Sometimes I may even cut down on something else so that in Ireland in the 1850s, there was a potato famine. And people loved potatoes because that is the only thing that they could buy easily. And potato prices went up. And the demand also went up. So the economists of that period, they started analyzing how is that possible. They found that people who used to buy something else like bread or maybe pastry and so on, they cut that expenditure, transferred it to buy potato because potato was for survival. So this kind of intersectoral movements make economics a very complicated subject, and therefore we now have to be very careful, and your mind should be open. You must look at all alternatives and not rush to the press to say something ridiculous and become laughable. So economics have started here with this introduction. I have, I think, some more to give you. Economics of growth, which will be the next time, and the concept of optimization, and that's and then finally, what constitutes economic policy. Economic policy, by the way, I think if I'm not wrong, Ramesh has one more chart to show. Yeah, I will not go into details, but economic growth. I'm not given the full sentence-wise explanation, but here innovation and technology is the most important thing in economics, because about 50-60% of the growth is usually for fast-growing countries due to innovation, not due to more capital, more labor. So capital and labor come, and join with innovation. Innovation then relies on infrastructure. What is infrastructure? Physical, roads, this thing. Financial, stock market, this blah blah. Human, that means people, enterprising people, inventing people, startups, this thing, that thing. And social means the desire to save more, put money in the bank instead of putting it in a khajana in your under your clothes in almari. These are some of the attributes you need. That will lead to growth rate, reduction in poverty, because everybody will be able to earn. Structural change, that's a very important concept which I'll describe next time. And the rise in productivity. Without rise in productivity, you will run into what is called the law of diminishing returns. You will get less and less and less. So all that I will cover in a later lecture. But today I was only interested in making you realize this is not common sense. This is a complicated technical subject which you have to read, and then only it will ferment in your mind. And you will be able to understand it. But at the moment, I'm trying to given these simple concepts so that you don't make bloomers like $5 trillion in 5 years. You see, and don't say all those horrible things that are being said in the budget speech. Thank you, Arvind. You want to add something?
I have 2-3 points. One point is you said about what is GDP. These days, people are jokingly saying GDP is gas, diesel, and petrol. Because everything is going up. Gas is going up, diesel is going up, petrol is going up. So the GDP is going up. Anyway, that's a joke. Now, when we talk about GDP, we also have a concept of GNP, and NNP. So some
Yeah.
people who reading the newspaper reports, etc., the gross national product and net national product. So will you please spend 1 minute in explaining what is
Well,
GNP and what is NNP?
it's not that simple to explain. If you take gross domestic product, you have not subtracted exports from it because it has gone out. You have not added imports which has come into the country. So if you do that, it will become gross national product. If you want net national product, every machine and everything is depreciating. So you have to remove the depreciation part. And there is a more complicated concept called obsolescence, when it may not have depreciated but it's become out of date. So those cannot be included, valued as before. So it's just basically a technical
So when
question
we
of what.
calculate the per capita income of the country, do we say per capita GDP or per capita GNP or per capita NNP?
International practice is per capita GDP, which is gross domestic product,
Right.
before you remove depreciation.
Right.
And sometimes net, for net you have to also remove subsidies and taxes. So I mean, those are. You're not yet working for a PhD, so don't worry about it just now. We are
Okay,
trying to
one more
tell you.
concept. One more concept is when we talk about GDP for the whole country, we also have states in India. For example, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, Maharashtra. We have a concept of SDP, state
Yeah,
domestic
state.
product.
Yeah,
Can
yeah,
we
yeah.
say GDP some of the state domestic products?
No,
No.
because there will be minus and plus when you this is what is produced in the
Right.
state, and then that goes to another state and becomes an input. So you can't include it twice.
Correct.
Okay.
So I thought this could clarify. And third thing, I just want you to clarify to the viewers, when you say investment divided by incremental capital output ratio, and when you say 36%, now this 36% is actually including the domestic savings of the people, savings of the government, plus the investment from outside. FDI is included here.
Domestic service savings, when it is invested, we add it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
We are assuming that savings is equal to investment.
Right.
Okay. I'm not saving in putting it under my clothes in the almara. That's also savings, but that's a popular use of the word savings. Technical word is what you have made available, like putting it in a bank. Once you put it in a bank, it's your savings. But when somebody draws from the bank, it becomes an investment as a loan.
Right.
It becomes an investment. So that is the difference. So
What about FDI? Do we include FDI in this investment?
naturally, if the FDI goes for investment, it will be. Otherwise, you'll have to say net domestic investment. You will not.
Rate will also depend on FDI. But if the FDI increase and
Yes,
the ICOR remains the same, then growth rate will be higher.
yes, but we must know where this FDI actually is going, because there are people call it FDI, but it may be just like participatory notes, bringing in money, putting in the stock market. The stock market goes up, they sell. Yeah, there's no creating of assets there.
Right.
So you've got to be very careful. I mean, you're now going too far afield, mister. So
No, I thought I will explain it to the viewers so that this
no,
confusion.
why? We'll come to all that. We'll come to all that. Let them digest these things.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I ask them, listen, what's the growth rate if the rate of saving is so and so, and the capital output, they should be able to answer and not worry about whether it's gross, net, this, that, and all that. Okay?
So
And then later on.
in the subsequent episodes of this economics words of wisdom, Arth, Gyan, Ganga, we'll also include these kind of questions which we have been receiving from the viewers, and some other further explanations which require, for example, when you say incremental capital output ratio, maybe the innovation and the technology and things like that, those things will be explained later as we discuss along, and maybe several other terms associated with GDP. How much has been GDP? You explained current prices and constant prices, and everything that we talk about in terms of money that is either in the current prices or in the constant prices. These days, we are talking about 2011-12 as the base. So when we talk about constant prices, that means we are talking about 10 years back.
No, constant prices can be backwards also. That's why we have two kinds of index numbers, the last year index and the past index. Last year index will say in 2011-12 prices, and all of you evaluated at that price. And past index will say 2021 prices, and everything in the back will be evaluated in this latest prices. Past naturally will be larger because the prices must have gone up. So, but you have to have one fixed price standard, and so either you have a earlier last year or you have past.
So maybe in subsequent episode we'll also discuss why the Central Statistical Office changes the base year and how many times the base year has been changed. In fact, there have been questions also on CSO that when the base year was changed and the figures were manipulated and the convenient figures were dished out.
This is our fault. It is not the fault of CSO. They make it. You should understand when they say the base year is so and so, then you must say, okay, CSO, give us if the base year was the old base year, what would be the GDP? And then bring it out in public. You are ignorant, and so whatever they say, you accept it because you have no training in economics. That is the problem with that. Jetli was doing this all the time, boosting the growth rate by changing to a later period.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Swamy. It has been wonderful explanation. As I said, there was a big build-up for this show. Many people who were in higher places in corporate world, they were also looking forward. In many students, management students, engineering students, and in general public, people were looking forward to this program. Today, you have spent about 50 minutes only explaining that economics is not common sense. Economics is science. Economics has a principle, and economics works on these formulas. And of course, you also gave some explanations about the growth in GDP. And on further occasions, the issue of GDP will come again, and many different issues related with GDP will also come. So thank you, Dr. Swamy, for spending time. It's just like a classroom for many people. And of course, next time we will also use technology to maybe use some kind of whiteboard where you can write and explain also, in case some students, some viewers.
I'll do it the way Ramesh has done this time. It's very convenient for me. I'll give him in advance the diagram and let him put it out. Then I'll say,
yeah. Thank you. Jagdish, you have a question? Ramesh?
No, Jagdish, I mean, there is a lot of, Dr. Swamy, predominantly there are a lot of questions on, can you suggest a book? So my recommendation to them is don't read a book. Listen to these lectures. You don't need to read a book.
At the moment, no, the time for reading a book has not come.
Can't come. Okay.
Because they won't be teaching it the way I'm teaching.
Great.
I've been teaching for how many years?
Mm-hmm.
10 years from 2000 to 11 years from 2000 to 2012. That's 12 years. And then before 2 years in 86, 85, 87. And then every year during the 70s, and then straight 7 years in the 60s. I mean, I must have taught at Harvard maybe almost 50 years, you see, over a period. So therefore,
I'll just add from my side, Paul Samuelson has written a book on economics called Economics Only, and it is like a Bible of economics. So those who want to have a primer, the first reading economics, I think maybe Paul Samuelson is the
be careful. Paul Samuelson originally wrote himself. Then as he got older, he died I think in 94 or something like that. As he got older, he had to bring in students. In fact, he asked me whether we can do a Hindi version of his book. But I got wrapped into so many things, I couldn't keep the commitment. So he had in various languages, and then he got his students who had become professors to help him to. So the latest one has a name of a professor who was a student. So then, okay. So
Dr. Swamy, there are already a lot of questions. these questions are not for today's show. It's more of an introductory show. They're already asking about inflation and all those things. We'll wait.
Yeah, I'll come.
Please reserve your questions. When we come to those subjects, we're going to talk about everything. A lot of your questions that are there, I know we see that, but this is purely an introduction.
Yes.
In my view, don't read a book. Just listen to these lectures.
No, not just now.
Dr. Swamy is condensing what he has learned all these years. So you just can just watch this over and over again. Thank you. Okay, Jagdish, Arvind, you go ahead. Finalize.
Jagdish, you have any questions?
Yeah,
no, Arvind, you please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Swamy. And as Ramesh said, all these topics which people have in their mind, whether it is money, whether it is money circulation, whether it is inflation, whether it is trade or investment or rates or prices, everything we'll discuss. But everything has a sequence. We have drawn a sequence of the topics, and Dr. Swamy will take up in the next thing. The definition of economics of growth will further be explained, and then what constitutes economic policy, how governments devise different policies. Those issues will also be taken up by Dr. Swamy before we go into the trade, investment, banking, this and that. So thank you very much, viewers, for showing the curiosity, and we hope today's first inaugural program has lived up to your expectations, and there will be many improvements as per your suggestions, and the questions that you're asking are being made note of. We are noticing all the questions that you have asked, and we'll also be in subsequent episodes explaining this. And Dr. Swamy will also use the new form of technology where he can explain formulas and things like that. So keep watching this program every Saturday. This is the first inaugural episode today. Next will be on March 13. And tomorrow we have the regular Sunday episode of Words of Wisdom, Gyan Ganga. We'll be taking up a different topic tomorrow. So every Saturday, economic Words of Wisdom, Arth Gyan Ganga, and every Sunday, regular episode of Words of Wisdom, Gyan Ganga. And this program is viewed in more than 40 countries, and a large number of viewers have been watching this program. Tomorrow is the regular Sunday program. We'll be meeting again at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time tomorrow. Till then, before we say goodbye, let me thank co-hosts Jagdish Shetty and Mr. Ramesh Swamy, and the technical team headed by Ashish Shetty, Ishwar Iyer, Gadgi Rakesh, Swaminathan, Tejas, and Vishal Mehta. Thank you very much. Without your contribution, this program would not have been possible. Thank you, viewers. We'll meeting tomorrow again at 8 p.m. Till then, Namaskar, Jai Hind.